The next, the plugin of the week is the HEQ by Waves. And so what I want to do is just kind of just go over very quickly um, what the HEQ is. This is actually one of my favorite EQs from the Waves collection. And because it gives so many controls, it's really an incredibly advanced plugin. One, it has a full frequency analyzer built into it. And then in addition to a high pass and a low pass filter, you have 5 bands. Now, what's cool about like the H series components by Waves is that it's a hybrid. What they decided to do is they try to take all the technology and development that they put into in terms of emulating analog components, and they wanted to put all of this into a plugin. So when you actually select from the different filters, what they do is they give you a selection of 7 different characteristics that the components can take. So there's US Vintage, UK Vintage 1 and 2, US Modern, UK Modern. And so these are different, they don't tell you what the actual components are, but each one will give a different shape. So for example, if I have a shelving EQ and I boost, you could see that it maintains a certain shape. If I now go to the UK vintage one, you'll see that that shelf takes on a very different shape, right? So it has a bit more of a resonant kind of characteristic, and no bell control, right? No, and then you go to the UK Vintage 2 that has a smoother characteristic, and this is just the way. So some of these things are the shape of it, right? And they all are a little bit different. So here, when you get to Digital One, this is kind of cool because what it does is it allows you to go between, an overly resonant kind of filter shape from the other. Is actually kind of a really cool thing with the parametric. So if I do a boost here with the parametric, and then I switch to the Digital One characteristic, it gives an offset kind of filter. So normally when you have a parametric EQ, so for example, if I have a parametric EQ, I have a narrow or a wide Q, and it works equally around the centered frequency. When I work with here with the Digital One, when I switch the bell characteristic, I kind of shift it to be sharper on one side than on the other, and I can shift it in either way. And this kind of gives you this resonant characteristic on one side and a smooth characteristic on the other. And this is a really, really, really powerful way, for example, to shape like the low end. Like actually, what I like to do with this for mid range, right, is I'll do a mid range dip, for example, say on a kick drum. And so I want to do that mid range dip, and let me kind of take the boost. So I'll take it down here. And what I want it to do is I want it so that it kind of gives a little bit of resonance right around the fundamental of the drum, but does a dip right afterwards, and then has a smoothing characteristic back to the rest of the tone of the drum. And that's really, really cool. So that's a very unique shape that they created just specifically for this plugin. And I've never seen an offset plugin like this. Normally what you would have to do is have a parametric, and then another parametric that would be adding the boost in here to kind of offset and rechange the shape on the side, right? So it gives you like this sort of just pure, clean digital kind of thing. All of these different characteristics from some of the different vintage plugins, which you could see have wider, varying width and shapes to the bell curves. Very, very cool, right? The way that this is laid out. So you got all these bands. You can work mid-side. So what's really cool about this, for example, is that I can actually filter the mid signal if I have a buildup of too much, mid frequency, for example, on this, but leave the side signal unprocessed, right? Or apply a different filter shape to the side signal, right? So I can actually filter at a different frequency, right? And this way I can actually shape the mid signals pan center versus signals to the side. It makes it an amazing mastering tool, right? So in addition to left right, you have mid side processing, input and output level controls, phase inversion, all that sort of stuff, and the output controls. And then on top of all of that, in addition to all of that, and in addition to having an analyzer that shows the input signal, the output signal, and then the differences between the sides, you got freeze controls, you got peak hold controls. So this just allows you to display just the left or the mid signal, which I turned off, or the right side and the side signal. So you can display left, right, in and out, and you can just turn it off altogether if you don't want to see it. Another cool characteristic about this is if you're working with particular frequencies, there's a keyboard which allows you to click on the actual note. So say, for example, that there was a particular note or tone and you figured out what exact note it was. You could actually go here, and this would be a perfect example of where you would use a digital filter and then just notch out that frequency, right? So go and you could actually select the actual musical note and it will automatically move it to that particular frequency, right? And you could do that to boost a note or pull out a note. If you, sometimes you have like a certain instrument and one note will just stick out for whatever reason more than the others, say on a guitar or whatever, or another instrument, maybe on an old keyboard, right? You can find out exactly what that note is and dip right at that note by the amount so that it's more balanced relative to the other notes on that keyboard. So that's really, really amazing feature in here. And then there's a whole harmonic distortion section. So you can add this in and you can exaggerate it up to 200%. And then you could take the total harmonic distortion and go up to 1,000%. So it allows you to overdrive the signal on top of all that. So it's just like this incredibly feature-rich plugin in terms of like just having the frequency analyzer built into it, the mid-side controls, all the different analog component characteristics in terms of the filter shapes, the harmonic distortion section. It's like you can just get so much done with this plugin. It's just really like a ridiculously amazing plugin, right? So this is one that is definitely one like in terms of its flexibility, in terms of the total amount of things that you do to this. I don't know that there's anything else in the Waves collection that compares as a total package to this. So, you know, if you could only buy one EQ from the entire collection, this would probably be it, because it would allow you to add so many different tonal colorations. And exactly, it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. Whereas, you know, like if you go to the Q10, it gives you a lot of control, but it's somewhat generic. And the REQ is very musical sounding, but it is just what it is. And then, you know, when you start to get to some of the other analog components, you get out SSL EQ, which has its characteristic, and API EQ, which has its characteristic, and Neve EQs, which has their own characteristic. And that's more particular to those things. This gives you kind of the best of all worlds in terms of your ability to kind of shape and add tonal coloration. So it's a really, really powerful tool and an amazing plugin. I don't know if it's on sale, but, you know, check, you know, on that. And see, you know, pick this up, you know, if you find it on sale and you don't have it as part of one of your kits for Waves. But really, really cool one and powerful one. So definitely one worth having.